Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and we are back from another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. And so let's get right into it. First, we have Apple's Ice Block Takedown shows how easily Washington can pull the plug on the internet from BusinessInsider.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I don't really care that the government told Apple to take the Ice Block app off of its store, but I'm pretty sure that the Democrats pressured Apple to remove Parler and maybe I think Gab as well from their store. But Reddit doesn't care. Reddit thinks that's whenever right leaning app gets removed from the Apple Store, Reddit's always like, oh, private companies can do whatever they want. But whenever a left leaning app like IceBlock here gets removed from the Apple Store, Reddit's always like, oh, the government was pressuring them. And that just goes to show you that, Reddit doesn't really have any values at this point, only teams. When a member of the out group gets banned or censored or removed from social media, it's always private companies can do whatever they want. Whenever it's a left leaning person or app, Reddit's always like, oh, it was government pressuring them to censor it. And yeah, personally, I wish they would be ideologically consistent, but a lot of people these days aren't ideologically consistent. They only have teams rather than any coherent set of values. And that's my thought on that issue. Next, we have Trump posts bizarre AI video of Project 2025 Architect as the Grim Reaper, original title from Gizmodo.com, posted by Doctor Who 07. And yeah, Trump's always been, that's always been Trump's MO. He's always been kind of a shit poster like that. So this isn't really anything new. If he wants to post an AI video of himself jizzing all over the Constitution, I personally wouldn't care for it. Just like I don't really care for this one. But it's only to get a reaction out of Redditors, pretty much like Doctor Who 07 here. And eventually, you gotta stop taking his bait every single time. But that's the problem with Reddit is they'll always take the bait every single time. If they stop taking the bait and just started ignoring Trump, he'd lose a lot of the power they had of his power over them. But sadly, they can't seem to realize that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have U.S. strikes another boat off Venezuelan coast, killing 4, Defense Secretary announces. But from CNN.com, posted by LegioX. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that, but the U.S. government does have the legal monopoly on the use of force to justify bombing or killing whoever it wants to. And if they want to bomb boats off the Venezuelan coast because they think they're drug ships, well, I personally don't really care for it, but they have the monopoly on the legal use of force to justify doing whatever they feel like. With that being said, I personally really don't care for this, because it might get us into war with Venezuela, but personally, the U.S. is seemingly always at war with some country somewhere, so that's not really anything new at this point. Trump might market himself as an anti-war president, but he's still pretty much the same warmonger that Obama, Bush, and pretty much every figurehead since at least Reagan has been. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have ADL scraps glossary of extremism after backlash from Newsweek.com, posted by EmptyRow5585. And personally, I don't really care for the ADL. I think they're a lot like the SPCL, Sovereign Poverty Law Center. They're a bunch of bullies who use their historical standing to get whatever they want when it comes to, labeling people as anti-Semitic or racist. And yeah, if you want to label anyone who disagrees as anti-Semitic, racist, Hitler, Nazi, etc., I think you should be able to do so. But eventually, when you come after anyone who dissents at all, people are going to realize that you're just a partisan machine that exists to only to censor opposition. And that's very much what the ADL and SPCL LLC are. And yeah, the ADL Reddit should arguably despise the ADL, since the ADL is labeled Reddit the most anti-Semitic website on the internet. I think I've read, but Reddit, they think it's great when it goes after the right. When it goes after the left, that's the only time they ever have to criticize it. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Bessent unveils illegal plan to put Trump's face on U.S. coins from the dailybeast.com, posted by CH4Locks. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that. I saw a post on X recently. It was this guy who tweeted, what was it? It was, War Monitor, no U.S. coins ever feature a sitting president. The law specifically bars it to avoid authoritarian vibes. Think about that. And they linked to, I guess, the law about free one U.S. code and 5112D2, and that is them quote tweeting Republicans and Trump. Treasury's planning to mint a $1 coin featuring Trump's face for America's 250th anniversary, Politico. And it's welcome to the Banana Republic. And the coin shows Trump raising his fist and saying fight, fight, fight. And then there's another one with this was Trump's profile. And I said in response to this, though, I said not true. And I linked to the Wikipedia page for United States sesquicentennial coinage, and added a picture of George Washington and Calvin Coolidge, who was the sitting president at the time, on it, both in profile. So ultimately Reddit or X at this point, but pretty much probably a Redditor as well. They'll always say, "Oh, this is some unique situation that's never happened before." Well, in reality, it has happened before. It might have been 100 years ago, but it still happened, and that's very much where U.S. politics is at now. A lot of people want to market this as some unique time in history. Well, in reality, all times in history present their own challenges, and that's true regardless of what knucklehead is in the White House. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have 10-3-25 to ICE burning of the flag, posted by CH4Locks, and that's a screenshot of a truth from Donald Trump to ICE, Border Patrol, law enforcement, all U.S. military. As per my August 25th, 2025 executive order, please be advised that from this point forward, anybody burning the American flag will be subject to 1 year in prison. You'll be immediately arrested. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then there's another post from Swamp Banky Dan that is a direct link to that Truth Social about to ICE Border Patrol, law enforcement, all will be subject to 1 year in prison. You'll be immediately arrested. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for flag burning, but with that being said, ultimately people should be able to burn whatever flags they want as long as it's their property rather than someone else's property. I'm sure if this was Joe Biden and they changed the American flag to the pride flag, Reddit would love this and think it's the greatest thing ever. But since Trump's in the out group and the American flag's kind of seen as more of a Trump MAGA thing, Reddit will think this is the worst thing ever and take Trump's bait and burn as many American flags as possible and look and sully their reputation even more. So yeah, personally, I don't really care for this, but Trump's obviously just baiting Redditors to burn the American flag and sully the last reputation even more than it currently has been, even in the wake of the Charlie Kirk shooting. And I complain a lot about Donald Trump, but I definitely do think he's smarter than a lot of Redditors give him credit for. To be the dominant figure in American politics for pretty much over a decade at this point is saying is something that's very hard to do, even if you do have access to as much money as Donald Trump does. Because it's hard. You think the Reddit's always saying, "Oh, this is the end of Donald Trump. We got him this time," like after January 6th. Or after Russiagate, or after whatever, or after eating the cats, eating the dogs, But he just keeps going on, and I don't really care for the guy, but you gotta respect that, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have update. Hedge fund billionaire press Treasury Secretary for Argentina bailout. Argentine media reports from Popular.info posted by Anarcho Federation, and they added Argentinian news are covering the reason for the bailout. Rob Citron, whose hedge fund bet big on Argentina, reportedly asked his friend for a rescue package. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent delivered. And then they posted again. Update, Treasury Secretary press justify Argentina bailouts that benefits wealthy American investors from Popular.info, and they added American First Corruption and shut down Trump freezes $18 billion infrastructure project in Blue New York, but executes $20 billion bailout for Argentina's right-wing delay before midterm elections. They also saves Bessent's friend Rob Citron's AR bond investments. And yeah, personally, I don't think the U.S. should be bailing out any other foreign country. I don't think any taxpayer dollars should be going to any foreign country, even if they're under attack by another country like Ukraine or Israel. But if ultimately taxpayer dollars are going to be sent wherever they're sent, and yeah, personally, I don't really care for them going to Argentina. I agree with what Malay does, but that doesn't mean we should be bailing him out. And yeah, if I think if taxpayers want to send their dollars to Argentina and mark them and mark them as such, I think they should be able to. But in the current system of forced taxation, where you're forced to pay taxes and you don't even know where the money's going to go to, I think that's very much not something that is going to be justified. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. I also think it's interesting how Reddit says, "Oh, we love LGBTQ people," but since Scott Bessent, who's gay, is a member of the out group, they think he's the worst treasurer or secretary ever. And I think that's interesting. It's like it's always it's always like you're in the in group, and unless you dissent at all, then you're suddenly in the out group. You can be black, disabled, trans, etc., all the oppression statuses. But if you're a Republican, or if you say one wrong thing, suddenly you're the worst thing ever. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And and I also have a post I want to share from the Libertarian Party USA subreddit that I just posted. Where is it? It's loading right now. Let's see. Yeah, my Wi-Fi's kind of slow right now, so just wait for it to load. I'm just gonna maybe close and open it again. And I said libertarian perspectives on political violence and violent rhetoric. It definitely feels like both of them are becoming increasingly more common. I would say that the libertarian position is that you should be able to use whatever violent rhetoric you feel like, but when you start justifying the use of force in order to achieve your political ambitions, that would be decidedly unlibertarian. People are going to justify that, and if you want to justify political violence and killing people for what they say, I guess they should be able to. But I would also add that once you justify killing one person with the exception of self-defense, it's only a matter of time before you can justify killing any person. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for all this increasing rhetoric about how, the other side is literally Hitler or Nazis or communists or Stalin or whatever, but ultimately, if people want to say that, that's on them. If they want to justify acting on it, ultimately people will act just by acting on whatever they feel like, regardless of the system of government in place. And yeah, I personally think the only way out at this point is for national divorce. As I said in my previous podcast, I tweeted yesterday, I think this is a good tweet. A lot of people want unity in these trying times, but much like collectivism, it's not something that can be forced, it needs to be voluntary. Forced unity is not unity, it is merely submission. And I think that's very important to remember as well. If people want to have voluntary collectives, I think that's fine. But right now, we're in a forced collective, and that's the source of a lot of political stress. These people are forced to obey the laws of whatever the ruling power currently thinks. And yeah, personally, I think the only libertarian position is, you gotta endorse secession down to the individual level. If you want to make laws for yourself and all parties that consent to them, that's fine. But currently, laws are inherently controlled by those who are in positions of authority, who you don't even get to interact with pretty much ever, and that's something that I think is important to note as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.